The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I, Raj Baheti from Audit Time, on behalf of Mr. Manoj Agarwal, would like to host the program today. I would like to welcome everyone for the webinar. The speaker for today's webinar on best practices in internal audit is Ms. Sonali Raut. To give a brief background about Ms. Sonali ma'am, she is a chartered accountant by qualification and is a certified information system auditor. Currently, she is working with Voltas Limited as Deputy General Manager Internal Audit. She has been with Voltas Limited for last 8 years now, prior to which she was partner with ex-president of ICAI, Mr. Mukund M. Chitle, from 2002 to 2006. Now, I would request Ms. Sonali Rawat ma'am to continue with her presentation for today and share her experiences with us. Sonali ma'am. Hello, Sonali ma'am. I think she's experiencing some internet problem.
Hello. Yeah, I'm able to hear you. Not you are able to hear to me? Yeah. Okay, okay. And the PPT is visible, right? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Raj, for the introduction. Good morning, friends. Today's discussion, I would like to share the practices which I have understood to be the best, which I have gathered over the years during my career. To understand what could be the best internal audit practices, I would first like to spend some time on the roles and responsibilities of an internal auditor. This is essential in my view, as what practices could be understood as best would be those which are designed to adapt to the organizational setup and needs while delivering the roles and responsibilities of an internal auditor and maintaining his independence. Towards the end, we shall spend a few minutes on certain thoughts on what could also be adopted as the internal best practices. let's look at the roles and responsibilities. The internal auditor has reporting responsibilities mainly to the audit committee and the management. These are governed by the Companies Act and the standards prescribed by the Institute of Internal Auditors. Let's have a look at the major roles and responsibilities of internal audit function, which would help us understand the practices which could be the best for the function. Broadly, the responsibilities of an internal auditor are providing assurance to the management regarding the internal controls, risk management issues, governance systems, reporting deficiencies of internal controls, providing recommendations for improving the organization's operations in terms of both efficient and effective performance, evaluating information security and associated risk exposures, regulatory compliance program with consultation from the legal counsel, and evaluating organization's readiness in case of business interruption. The new Companies Act has also put up sub-responsibilities on the internal auditor, in which the board, management, independent directors are expected to seek increased comfort from the internal auditors in areas of compliance, fraud, internal financial controls, corporate social responsibility, related party transactions, and much more, and to comply with the fiduciary responsibilities. While with the increased responsibilities, the timely completion of audits is equally important so that the findings and the recommendations are implemented for improving the organization's operations in terms of both efficient and effective performance. We should also bear in mind that the time availability of the directors and the senior management is limited, in which we have to draw the attention to the significant audit findings. The organizational setup, in my view, also plays a role in establishing the best internal audit practices. In most of the corporates, the internal audit setup is centralized given the cost constraints. However, the locations which are to be audited are spread across the country and beyond. Hence, we generally see outsourcing model adopted by the corporate these days. To meet up with all the responsibilities that we have just understood and the expectations of the audit committee and deliver the results, we need to streamline our internal work processes. Hence, best practices, in my view, could be evolved over a period based on the organizational setup and needs of the audit committee. Let's move on to the practices which I have understood to be the best over the period. Talking about the model of operation, and as we just spoke, it is regarding the model of internal audit. More and more we are seeing the organizations adopting an outsourcing model. We can think of in this having a co-sourcing model, which is a little different from the outsourcing model. In co-sourcing, it ensures that there is a standardization in the output, and also the auditees experience a level of comfort with the in-house team. In this model, generally, the chief internal auditor is owning the audit planning and the scope of assignments. It is recommended that he also closely oversees the audits conducted by the co-sourcing partners. Participating in interaction with the auditees for every assignment should be one of his responsibilities. The reports that are released by the co-sourcing partners should be overseen and should be under the signature of the chief internal auditor. The next area which can be discussed is for the best practices is in the conduct of an audit assignment. Since this is one of the core function of audit, we will deal with it in a little more detail. Stages of audit assignment. As we all know, broadly, the stages of any audit assignment can be understood as planning, scheduling, execution, and closing of an assignment. In execution, we'll further see the detailed stages of pre-audit and field work. We can look at the practices that can be adopted in each stage of the audit in the following slides. Planning generally starts with the drawing up of an annual audit plan. It is essential to link the audit plan to the overall business and operational risk and to the extent possible the strategic risks. For this, we can consider the use of risk matrix and heat maps, which are largely available from the various softwares which are in the market, which identify the risks, helps the auditor identifying the risks. To draw up an audit risk-based audit plan, it is also suggested that we take sought inputs from the audit committee, the various business unit heads in the organization, the chief financial officer, the statutory auditors, and of course the past reports of internal audit itself. This ensures that the audit plan is in sync with the business concerns and risks identified by each business unit and at the company level. This also gives the comfort to the statutory auditors as they can rely on the work of the internal auditors. Once the annual audit plan is in place, an audit calendar should be worked upon and shared with the chief financial officer and the business units. To make the plan workable while drawing up this calendar, we should bear in mind to avoid specific periods like month, quarter, half, year ends and year ends when the auditees are likely to be occupied in their daily activities. This would ensure the engagement of auditees to the internal auditor. Others as a constraint which should be borne in mind are while drawing up the annual audit calendar are the weather conditions, if any, as we saw that the audit locations could be spread over the country or across. And there could be, with the overseas locations, there are other constraints like external factors like visa availability, cost of travel, and accommodation in a particular period. Availability and engagement of auditees is very important for us to help as an internal auditor. Help us contribute as an internal auditor. Discussions with the auditees in meetings on findings can help us improve the quality of our reports. It also helps the acceptability of the recommendations made by us as internal auditor. Hence, planning, in my view, we should spend a little more time in the planning before we move on to the execution of an assignment. Generally, once the annual audit plan is made, the scheduling of assignment is the next step. This ideally should start with a circulation of a formal note of commencement. This generally helps because the auditees are informed well in advance. This period of information would be somewhere around 10 to 15 days notice time is something in my view which could be taken as a preferable time. This note or the communication which is circulated to the auditees should specify the precise dates of visit of the audit team to the location and the closing meeting. It should also be marked to all the concerned auditees and their reporting heads, which ensures that all are kept in the loop of communication right from the beginning. And it also helps us to ensure that the auditees block their calendars and in turn helps us to expect their availability in the discussions to be held. A notice of 10 to 15 days effectively gives at least a month's time to the auditee to block his calendar because as per the experience, the general time period of an assignment is around 15 days, 10 to 15 days. So effectively it works out to a month's notice. This communication, in my view, should also specify the audit objective and the scope so that there are no surprises to the auditees which could hamper the availability of the data and the people to us while we are at the location. Based on our past experience, we can also think of working out some average number of days for the execution of audit. This could be taken as model number of days, which could have factors come to be considered like the size of the assignment, the size and the volume of the data to work out the average number of days. This helps an internal auditor in conducting the assignment and meetings on the dates committed. Further, detailing of the schedule could be done by drawing up a day-wise schedule for the next 15 days that the auditor is going to be at the location. This day-wise schedule should be shared with the auditees, and we could also introduce concepts like while doing the audit of holding mock closing meetings before the final closing meeting. The discussions in this mock meetings, in my view, help avoiding the long discussions in the final closing meeting, thereby making the meetings time-bound and more effective. Mock meeting should be also used as a platform for discussions with the auditees for facts confirmations on the data and the conclusions that we would have reached as an auditor. And it should also be looked at as a platform where you could seek the responses from the auditees in writing. This mock meetings could be a little longer than the final closing meetings that we are going to hold. We will discuss about the mock closing meetings a little in detail when we discuss about the practices in the execution stage. Moving on to the execution stage, it could be broadly split into two stages. One is the pre-audit, the other is actual fieldwork. The use of ERPs by the organizations largely for accounting facilitates an internal auditor to have the pre-audit done while he is located at his head office and he did not necessarily be at the location. In pre-audit, the auditor should look for conducting walkthroughs with the auditees to obtain an understanding of the processes, the policies, the records, the MIS and the data availability with the auditees. The data collection and analysis should be done during this period. A little more drilling down on the analysis helps the auditor to have a focused sample selection. This addresses to an extent the time constraints generally faced by the internal auditor during the fieldwork. It also leaves adequate time to the internal auditor to work or review certain data which he comes across at the location which was not available during the pre-audit. It also provides enough time to extend the checking wherever the auditor feels necessary during the course of an assignment. The findings of internal auditor thus can be based on a larger sample, which is representative and not random. The information obtained in these interactions should be used to draw up the audit objective, scope and checklist before the auditor actually visits the audit location. The next to happen is the fieldwork. It is recommended that the fieldwork should start with a formal opening meeting and the discussion of the day-wise schedule. The intimation of this should be given preferably in the communication of the commencement of the assignment or at least before the arrival of the team at the location. During execution, a continuous dialogue with the auditee should be maintained. The opening meeting agenda should include also discussing on the preferred times for the discussion of the issues with the auditees which we come across while doing the field work, obtaining clarifications and resolving queries. This reduces the interruption to the auditees in their day-to-day working, and the internal auditor also gets uninterrupted attention. Ensures that the reviewer gives adequate time, and eventually the time commitments given by the team to the auditees can be adhered to. The draft of audit findings should be done on a continuous basis rather than towards the end of the assignment or towards the end of the field work, to be precise. These findings should be shared with the reviewer internally in the team for his inputs, and towards the end of the field work, an entire draft report should be drawn up, which should be ready for sharing with all the concerned auditees. Every observation in the draft report should be called for, and this should be giving a specific action plan and a target date. The action plans should also be obtained
Hello,
appropriately from the...
Hello, Sonali ma'am. Can you please start with this execution slide again, because we all missed it. The voice connection was gone.
Okay. Okay, so I'll start with this current slide which is being flashed.
Yeah.
Fieldwork. There were two slides.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Fieldwork.
Fieldwork. Okay. So the fieldwork should start with a formal opening meeting and discussion of the day-wise schedule. The intimation of this should be given preferably in the communication of the commencement of assignment, or at least before the arrival of the team at the location. During execution, it is essential that we maintain a continuous dialogue with the auditees. The opening meeting should also be used to include deciding on the times that an auditee would prefer for discussions of the issues that we come across during the audits, obtaining the clarifications from him, and resolving the queries. This reduces the interruptions of the auditees in their day-to-day working, and the internal auditor also gets uninterrupted attention. Within the internal audit team, we should also have a process of reviews on a continuous basis. This helps the reviewer to give his inputs during the course of assignment when the internal auditor is still on field, and it could help him do any further checking if required. Any calls on extending the checking can also be executed comfortably without affecting the audit schedule. Within the team also, timelines could be agreed on the reviews. This ensures that the reviewer gets adequate time, and eventually, as a team, we meet up with the time commitments that we have given to the auditee. The drafting or I'm sorry. The drafting of audit findings should be done on a continuous basis rather than towards the end of the fieldwork. These findings should be shared with the reviewer for his inputs. Towards the end, this will help the draft report to be ready for sharing with all the concerned auditees. Every observation in the draft report should also be discussed in the mock meetings that we are going to hold before the final closing meeting. These meetings should be used to confirm the facts again with the auditees and sought responses from them in writing. Findings in the report should generally be very crisp and specific and should point out to identify the root cause why the observation or the finding is there. This also helps for the auditor to give recommendations which could be looked at in two parts. One, to address the issue or set it right, or the second could be to highlight certain areas where process improvements are required or for setting up new processes. The responses from the management, we should ensure that these are called for with a specific action plan, and for each action plan, a target date should be obtained. The action plans should be obtained also from the information technology, the IT team, or from the head offices or the zonal or regional offices who are responsible for implementing those recommendations or those action plans. In the final closing meeting, therefore, the audit findings with the responses should be again discussed, and this could be in the discussions in the closing meeting then can be restricted either to the significant observations, or you could deal with it in every single observation. The internal auditor should also revisit the final draft for any refinements in the drafting and circulate it again to the auditees post the discussion in the closing meeting. We should not forget that the timelines that we have set up should be extended to the release of the final report. The final report ideally should not be taking longer than 15 days from the closing meeting date. It should be issued within that time frame, or for you could work out some time frame of, but not extending 20 days. The internal auditor should also in the process document the data, the policies and the sampling techniques and the samples that he has used for reaching to the conclusions in the finding, which should be retrievable for future reference. This is required because generally the auditees have criticism that the auditors come again and keep asking me the same questions, which information I have already shared with them. Okay, what we discussed right now was about conducting of an assignment. In my view, there are other functions that an auditor performs and which are equally important for us to note, where we could think of implementing some practices. One of the success paths to the timely and effective completion of an audit assignment is the conduct of effective meetings. To achieve this, internal auditors should strive to have time-bound meetings. The various practices that we discussed as pre-audit, day-wise planning can help in achieving this objective. The presentations made in the meetings and in specific to the audit committee are another area which we should focus on. These presentations should be focused, crisp, engaging, and error-free. This should also provide the latest update on the actionables, which gives the auditor's perspective and the complete picture to the audit committee. At the end of the audit meetings of the assignments, we should also think of implementing a practice of seeking feedbacks. This, of course, is not applicable to the audit committees, but for the mock meetings and the final closing meetings that we are going to hold with the auditees, this helps. We should time it towards the end of the closing meeting so that the thoughts are fresh in the minds of the auditees, and we can expect to get a more genuine feedback. Alternatively, or rather additionally, internally also within the team, we should start the practice of exchanging feedback towards the end of the assignment. We should try and in these sessions find out what was that went better as compared to the earlier assignment, and it should also look at the areas which we could have done better. This continuous feedback within the team also helps us to correct ourselves in timely manner and address the concerns that we face, as well as the feedback that we receive from the auditees. We can also think, inculcate or implement a practice where the auditor also gives feedback to the auditees, which should generally bring out issues where the data availability or non-availability, or which could talk about the conduct of meetings or of getting the responses. Moving on to the next, the entire result of our audit findings are the actionables, and hence tracking of these actionables is another important function for an internal auditor. The action plans that the auditees share with us as responses to the observation should be tracked for a status of implementation. This tracking could be done at specified intervals, say quarterly or half-yearly. This could be worked out with the audit committee as per their comfort as well. This status should be tracked till the closure of the action plan, and we should try and see if we could implement the practice of reporting the status to the audit committee. The status reporting to the audit committee at these intervals could be based on the responses received from the auditees at these intervals. The verification and validation of this could be then done as a part of a compliance audit subsequently by the auditor. Any deviations, if observed in the status reported, could then be highlighted to the audit committee in the next meeting. The next role that an auditor plays, or the important responsibility of the auditor, is reporting to the audit committee. We all know that the audit committees, with the audit committees, we have a limited time availability. This is the time when the auditor has to get the focus of audit committee. We could think of having at least 2 meetings of audit committee, those which should be exclusively discussing the internal audit agenda, which include drawing up the attention of the audit committee to significant observations, the giving reporting on the status update on the actionables, and other internal issues of working of the department. While we present our observations to the audit committee, care should be taken that the tone of the presentation should be firm but in no way offensive. Language should be clear and not ambiguous. The findings to be presented to the audit committee could be reviewed by the chief internal auditor with the management in advance before these are actually presented in the audit committee. As a good practice, this helps us because any discussions or debates with the auditees can be handled in these meetings, so the presentations which go to the audit committees are more focused and crisp. This could also help us at achieving the objective of effective and time-bound meetings. The other practice which also helps us is circulating of the papers of agenda in advance. It should be at least a week in advance. This should be circulated not only to the audit committee but also to the business unit heads and the CFOs. Sorry. The actionables should also be tracked systematically, which are going to be reported to the audit committee, so that it helps us in giving a clear picture to the audit committee on the status of its implementation. The other challenge that we face during the discharge of the function as an internal audit team is that of team engagement and retention of talent. This is, in today's world, a major challenge for the profession. So while we talk about the practices to be adopted in the conduct of an assignment and in the conduct of our day-to-day activities, these are of equally important. Conscious steps in adopting best practices in planning, scheduling, and execution, though can minimize the challenges in the retention of the talent. This because it helps avoiding the constraints or the challenges that generally an auditor faces, like back-to-back travels, because internal audit function is inherent of extensive travels. We should try and minimize this so that less of discomfort is caused to the auditor, as at the same time we can deliver and discharge our functions of audit more effectively. The team should also be encouraged to participate and carve out time for internal meets with agendas like topic of academic interest, new developments in the profession, amendments that come across in various statutes and which are to be used by us as internal auditors to make our audit conclusions. The team can also think of having annual off-site meets, which could be having an agenda of like team building activities, soft skill development, and some workshops and technical sessions. For retention of the internal auditors, activities like in the monthly meets, declaring a best performance for the month, etc., would increase the bonding and make the workplace an exciting place. The engagement of auditor can also be increased by communicating in advance the expectations and the deliverables that we expect as a team from each individual member. We should not forget that the expectations that are spelled out should be measurable and should be communicated well in advance. Towards the end of the year, we could have an annual appraisal system in process, which is linked to the the expectations which have been laid out in the beginning of the year. This slide I have tried to put together the further thoughts that I have on the best practices. The other good practices, in my view, could be where we could think of using of some analytical tools for sample selection. Generally, internal auditors are also criticized for having a more of idealistic approach rather than a practical approach. In view of this, and in the interest of the profession, it's advisable if we can convince our management to encourage rotation of high flyers that are identified in the organization. This brings in a practical approach and a perspective from an operations person as well, which can be used by the internal auditors to refine his recommendations and to make it more practical. Development of auditing and soft skills is another area where we lose out generally because of the extensive traveling that we have. But it is essential to have some focused training which should be planned. This will help in honing the skills that are already possessed by an internal auditor, and in the long run help in effectively delivering the function of internal auditor. Sorry. We should also look at opportunities to maximize the participation of the team members in the process improvements that we suggest to our auditees. Not but last but the least is that we should internally adopt a practice of continuous review and revisit of the internal audit practices that we have adopted. As I said, these practices evolve over a period, and they could be designed and formulated based on the organizational setup and the organizational needs. With this, I end my session with my thoughts, sharing of my thoughts.
Ma'am, we have few questions here.
I'm open. Yeah.
Yeah. Ma'am.
Yeah, Raj, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Can I please request you to indicate one or two statistical tools, sampling tools, which is used for internal auditing?
Yeah. Yeah. In sampling tools, there are various tools that are available in the market. We can use something as IDEA is one of the tool which we have also been using in our organization. It's an analytical tool which is an Excel based tool. So it is, we are more familiar and it is more user friendly.
Okay.
There are other tools also available in the market, so we could look at those tools as well.
Okay. Ma'am, we have one more question. Ma'am, if you can go to the slide before the team engagement slide. Yeah.
Reporting to audit committee?
Yes, ma'am. We have a question. What is the best way to handle if auditees do not respond with updates?
Yeah. So as I've already we've discussed that once you start interacting with the auditees, and if you start telling them that the importance of this is reporting is to the audit committee, generally the auditees cooperate. Okay, and since the reporting is to the audit committee, if that is imbibed and carried through right from the beginning of the assignment, we are conducting the assignment itself and then making it as a formal system of obtaining the updates at periodic intervals, like what we decide as quarterly or half yearly, we should get these updates. It helps. I mean, my experience tells me that the auditors may take a little time in gearing up to this, but we have to persistently follow up and get this.
Okay. Ma'am, we have some more questions here. Can you please explain the pre-audit
Yep.
slide again?
Yeah, sure. Pre-audit is what is a concept which is a part of execution of an assignment. In pre-audit, the concept talks about is where you should start your work identifying your audit objectives, scope, and your samples even before you start your work, field work at the location. For this, we could talk to the auditees in advance for understanding the processes and the policies, which gives the auditor an insight into and relooking into the audit objective and scope that he or she has drawn up. Have I answered?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. One more question we have. Can you please explain on shifting of high filter resources?
Yeah, high flyers. Okay.
Okay. Oh, hi.
Yeah. See, in the organizations, people are as a chartered accountant, we are working in different fields, not only finance, accounts, but we also find chartered accountants working in operational fields. So there are chartered accountants who can help us, where we can think of getting this chartered accountants itself in our audit team. Or also, I have seen that there are people who are operational, who are engineers, who are in different profession by itself, nothing connecting to audit. But over the years, the experience that they gather while delivering their functions helps us to take them on board and use their experience in sharpening our audit conclusions. So they could be made a part of the team. This requires some efforts, and that's why I have put it something as thoughts, because this requires the convincing of management, which is at the highest level in the organization. So you can think of rotation within the divisions, within the departments that you are functioning. That's what I meant with rotation of high flyers in the organization.
And ma'am, how can we measure the scope of pre-audit?
How could you?
Measure the scope of
pre-audit?
Can you repeat, Raj? Yes, ma'am. How can we measure the scope of pre-audit?
No, it's not measuring the scope. It's like we are given an audit assignment and we have to lay down a scope. What is that exactly you are going to check in an audit assignment? Now, if the audit objective is clear, that if I am let's take an example, like if I'm going to do a sales order processing audit. So what is that you're going to look for? What is that an internal auditor going to contribute by doing this audit of sales order processing? That brings you to the audit objective. Now, so the for audit objective, sales order processing, one of the objectives could be that you see that the order processing time that is taken is not exceeding 8 days. Okay, so if this is what you want to see as an objective, or if this is what the division or the auditees have put as a benchmark for them, if we have to see its adherence or see whether there are really these cases or whether this is practically possible, this is an audit objective. The scope would then be that looking at various cases in the sample of how many orders were processed and what is the time range that these have been processed. So scope will be identifying looking at the orders. It could be then the analysis could say that okay, it has to be looked in for a particular type of customers, or it could be for a period in a particular period. So it could be towards the month end of the month end, or it could be towards the beginning of the month that the orders take long time processing. So that's identifying the scope during the pre-audit.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think we have one last question. Can you please elaborate on co-sourcing pattern of internal audit, and how is it beneficial over outsourcing?
Yeah. co-sourcing model is a little different from outsourcing. In outsourcing, generally it is understood that the entire responsibility of identifying the audit plan, the areas to be audited, the scope that that the auditor would look at, is entirely given to the team of outsourcing team. They are also a respected professional, so not undermining that, but still a, a person within the organization, like the chief internal auditor, if he is responsible for also identifying the areas of audit, the scoping of audit, even for the areas or the areas which the co-sourcing team is going to execute. It helps because generally observed is that the comfort of the employees in the organization is with the in-house team. So a mix of in-house and outsourcing to either even in for execution. It could also be that the entire audit plan that you draw, you can have, if you have an in-house team, then you can have the in-house team doing some audits and the co-sourcing partners doing some audits. That could be another way of working. But while that is also done, it is essential that the chief internal auditor is fully involved in this entire process of planning, scoping, the interactions that these teams have with the auditees, the closing meetings. He should also participate in the closing meetings. So his presence could make a little more difference in the way that the responses could be taken from the auditees.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, one last question. I mean, I have got an interesting for this. As for sampling, we can use CAT tools effectively. So can you please throw some light on how audit management solutions and applications help audit teams, especially from the benchmarking perspective? Should I repeat the question?
Yeah, if you could.
Yeah. As for sampling, we can use CAT tools effectively. So can you throw some light on how audit management solution and applications help audit teams? Also, we want to know it especially from the benchmarking perspective.
Okay. If I've understood right, I do agree that there are various CAT tools which are available in the market, which can be used for sampling techniques, and we should be using those because then it helps us to have samples which are scientific and not random. So this makes the samples more representative. Now the audit management tools that are available, these are something different from the analytical tools that I have talked about. So if I have understood it right, then the use of audit analytical tools in the system helps us because we can process large volumes of data in these tools, because there are no restrictions like suppose if this analysis has to be done in MS Excel sheets, then we generally face limitations of volumes. If the data is huge enough, then the speed slows down. So this could be avoided by the use of audit tools. And at the same time, when you have entirely taken the universe for the analysis and to identify the samples, your samples are likely to be more representative, and we can convincingly tell that the observations or the conclusions that we have reached on are not based on a small sample randomly selected from the entire universe of the data.
And ma'am, how does audit management solutions help the audit teams from the benchmarking perspective? Audit process management tools.
Yeah. Okay. Audit process management tools are something different, which actually what we are talking about is like what we are doing. We can see one of the tools that I know is Teammate or Pentana, where the entire audit process is managed through the tool. So the entire team management, the scheduling, planning, can be monitored through this application. So it also helps in tracking. This generally helps in tracking and monitoring so that we don't miss out on any deadlines or or the commitments that we have, the audit calendars that we have made. So in a way it helps in benchmarking, because then you are trying to improve on, and there is no subjectivity involved. Tomorrow if I am handling or monitoring something, it is not left to my skills to monitor or manage or to remind me of what is the next that I should be doing
And
in
ma'am,
audit scheduling or audit planning.
and what would be the audit tools
Yes,
to
yes.
replace the Excel sheets? What sort of audit tools are?
So see, the audit tools, as I said, one that I know is of Idea. The other is ACL is also a tool which is available in the market. So there could be other tools, and what one should look at is the tools which are more user friendly is one we should adopt, because generally time consumption should be less while we maintain while we get the benefits of maintaining a tracking of all the analysis that we have done. So we should look for this kind of tools.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. I think we have answered all the questions which have come up. So I would like to thank you for your valuable time and the knowledge that you have shared with us. And we look forward to have you with us again in the near
Thank you, Ram.
future. And thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you, friends, and have a good day ahead. Thanks, Raj, for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.